Welcome everyone to our another meetup with known Cyprus ambassador, famous speaker from London. Finally, we get her a slot to speak on our platform. And yeah, she's quite experienced in overall testing. She can tell more about herself later. And I saw really nice blogs of her and really inspired by her on different way of testing, accessibility, visual regression, Cypress, another way of testing. So yeah, today agenda is like Cypress testing beyond functional testing and more focus on visual regression, how we can more focus on things related to the HTML changes, CSS changes, pixel changes, and how we can do it more efficient way instead of automating everything with the Cypress, just checking the colors and different things. So yeah, so about me, I'm Akshay Gupta. I'm a QA technical lead at Otrium. Overall, like 8-year experience in testing and building teams, doing test automation, integration with pipelines. And together with me, Sandeep, please go ahead.
Yeah, I thought the only other button was here, but fine, sorry. So I've been in the IT world for about 20 years, and the last 5 years has been the focus on test automation. I'm now working as a freelance automation engineer with FedEx. And yeah, in the last year and a half, I really fell in love with the Cyprus. And yeah, I'm proud to wear the t-shirt, even though currently at FedEx we want to actually move to Playwright, but okay, that's a new learning experience. And yeah, Akshay and me, we came up with the idea of this meetup group since we saw that after the lockdowns happened, the meetups just froze. Almost nobody went really online with meetups itself. So we said, okay, let's revive this. And thankfully, we've been having at least one meetup every month, sometimes even more. So let's go ahead, Akshay.
Thanks, Sandeep. So our upcoming meetup is on mobile app automation from Motas. He's working for Bitrise. Another one is testing serverless app in AWS from Ali. He is from New Zealand. So these are two upcoming. And apart from that, we have apart from that, I am doing some marketing for my team. Like I am from Otrium. I joined a scale-up startup in Amsterdam. It is based on e-commerce, like we are selling clothes and we are expanding from Europe, UK, and now US also. So I am building a whole team for B2B, B2C and operation. I'm looking for senior QA engineers, mobile QA engineers, and my company is looking at different kind of all kind of engineers. So if you would like to, if you are in Europe or in nearby Europe, just Slack me or ping me on LinkedIn and let me know. We have a really cool opportunities and really nice stack overall. So just let me know if you guys are interested in any of these positions. And apart from that, we have upcoming meetings from Julia, Jon, and I am also planning with the Playwright, as Sandeep told, he is moving to Playwright, and I also see some pros of Playwright as compared to Cypress. So I am also mixing both the framework in future, where Cypress can't support, let's use Playwright there. And visual regression also Sandeep is planning, he did with Backstop. So we are showing how Backstop can help us also with the visual regression. We implemented that in Vodafone Ziggo together. And apart from that, we have from the famous Udemy course writer Hatem, React Native App Automation. He has quite a course on Udemy also. Another from Test Cafe from Nori. And some workshop, free workshop, we are planning on different kind of tools. If you are interested, if you want other tool, just let us know. Otherwise, these are the workshop that we are planning. Now flows to Mary for her meetup. So that's it.
Thank you, Akshaya. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Yep. So it's a really great opportunity because I've actually presented this talk before, but at the moment I've made some new tweaks. So I hope that you all you all will find this session useful. But basically in this session, we'll look at how you can extend your Cypress test to cover tests beyond functional testing. In this meetup, I'll specifically talk about visual testing and why it's important to add it into your testing strategy. I'll also give insights on what things you need to consider when doing visual testing. I'll also talk about what tools are available to help you with visual testing with Cypress, and at the end I'll do some quick like code walkthrough on how you can integrate some of these visual tools to Cypress. Cool. Cool. So to those of you who don't know me, my name is Marie and I'm a software tester. Currently, I am a quality engineering manager at Zoopla. Prior to that, I was working as a principal test automation engineer at News UK. I'm also a tech blogger, so I've got a personal blog at mariedrake.com. I mostly write about testing and test automation, but lately I've been using it to write about my personal development as well. So I'm a Cypress ambassador. So I like to spread the word about Cypress and help different individuals with any queries that they might have. I like to be active in the testing community by being a co-organizer of a meetup group. So we have a group called Cypress UK Community Meetup, although we haven't scheduled any new like meetups lately, but you can still watch some of the recordings on our YouTube channel. I also speak at various meetups, so like such as this one, some conferences as well, so I can share my knowledge on test automation, accessibility and performance. And if you're interested, I guess, to know more about accessibility and Cypress, I do have some online courses about those. So one is at Test Automation U and another is at Ministry of Testing. Cool. So to those of you that are new with Cypress, so Cypress is basically a framework. So it's a complete testing framework that can automate the browser. So it has a functional test runner that basically drives the browser just like a real user would do whenever they use your application. So it's a complete testing framework. So you can see it's bundled with all the other like libraries that you need to start writing tests. So if if you're thinking of like doing some assertions, Chai is already bundled in. And for the actual testing framework, Mocha is also in play. And if you want to do some mocking, like Sign-On is already part of Cypress. So the point is you can just install Cypress and everything, like from assertions, from like mocking your data, from actually like structuring your tests, everything is all bundled in one package. So what tests can it cover? So Cypress can actually cover different types of tests depending on what your requirements are. So first, it covers end-to-end tests. So this can cover entire user journeys that's typically driven from a UI. On its latest release, Cypress actually now supports component testing as well. So with component testing, it lets you test individual components in isolation without actually visiting the entire page, but mounting the component on the specific browser instead. Cypress also supports API testing because it has built-in methods already for making HTTP calls. Cypress also has a lot of different plugins. So one of its plugin is called Cypress Axe. So Cypress Axe is built on top of a library called Axcore, which actually lets you automate basic accessibility tests. So if you're thinking about introducing automated accessibility into your project, then Cypress can actually do that through the use of a plugin called Cypress Axe. And to those of you who don't know as well, so another plugin that Cypress can integrate to is called Cypress Audit. So Cypress Audit is a third-party library that actually uses Lighthouse, like on top. So if you're, thinking of doing some client-side performance testing, then by using this plugin into your Cypress test, then you can leverage like Cypress as well with that. And finally, Cypress can also cover visual testing with the support of, again, third-party plugins. And this will be the focus of today's meetup. So among other things, Cypress, it validates the structure of your DOM. It verifies that a button is visible or that it has the correct text. But what about the look and styling of your app? So how can we test that our application looks good visually? Now, if we have some visual bug, that's the first thing that our users actually notice. So we need to make sure that we can catch these issues like much more like earlier on. And these are just, examples of some of the visual bugs that I saw in production. And as you can see, there is no such thing as a bug-free application. And I think from these different like websites or like applications such as Slack, functionally it's still working, but like from a visual point of view, they weren't really very good to look at. Cool. And I just want you all to imagine that, okay, let's say that we have a new page, that we want to test. And on this, test, let's say that we have written a Cypress test. So what we can do is we can assert that the page contains the elements that we expect. So to do that, we have to get the individual components and then assert that that element is visible or that element contains the correct text. Now, for just a very simple test on, validating this page visually, you can see already that I had to spend, a lot of time, like finding the different elements on the page. And then, most of the assertions are just really like repeatable. So if for example that there's a new change to this page, so let's just imagine that some of the elements have been moved around, some colors as well, they've been updated. Apart from the existing elements, new elements have been added to the page, and let's just pretend that some of the selectors as well have been updated. Now, my functional test, as you saw, it was already lengthy, but it still won't be able to catch all these different like visual issues. It can definitely catch the selector difference, but we'll have to update that test again to include the new elements. And it also won't be able to detect the changes on the CSS. Now, technically, I can still assert the CSS properties. So you can see here that I'm just getting the field that I want to assert on, and I'm just getting the CSS property and then just asserting that it should have the right CSS styling. Now, this isn't actually best practice because you can imagine your test will become complex, it will be really hard to maintain, and this will just make your test super long. I can also guarantee you that if your team, if they see this type of test, they will avoid it like a plague. So the main question for today, how can we test that our application looks good visually? And this is where visual testing comes in. Now, with visual testing, we are validating what the user sees visually. However, it's actually very time consuming when you do it manually, and it also provides a slower feedback loop to the team. With visual testing, we also have to consider doing cross-browser visual testing. Nowadays, especially if you have a really wide user base, there's a lot of like visual differences with these different browsers. I think from a functional like side of things, there's not a lot of functional differences anymore between these different browsers. The code that gets deployed is mostly similar on any platform. However, the way that the code is rendered visually, it exposes those differences that we need to catch. Now, the obvious solution would be, of course, to automate this, especially if it's something that is quite manual, it provides a slower feedback loop. So we need to utilize, if there are any tools out there that can help us with automated visual testing. Cool. So automated visual testing is not really new. There are so many tools out there which can help you with visual testing. But the main idea with automated visual testing is you have a baseline image. So now your baseline image is your source of truth. Every time there is a code change and your visual test is run, that test will create, or it will take a snapshot. So that is your test image. The visual testing tool of your choice then will then compare this test image with the baseline image and then check the differences. Now, at the end, it will report to us whether our test passed or failed. And if you don't have any baseline image to begin with, it will simply promote your test image as your baseline image. But with the abundance of visual testing tools out there, I think Sandeep mentioned about Backstop.js. So in this sort of like scenario, which tool should you choose? And since this session is specifically focused on Cypress, I'm going to talk about the different visual testing plugins that you can integrate. And as you can see, there are actually different tools to choose from. I think the important part is, you make the decision and depending on your context and depending on your like business requirements, on your testing requirements, among other things. So I've actually written a blog post that I scheduled to be published this morning. So I'll share the link to my slides later on. But if anyone wants to have a read as to what do you actually consider when doing visual testing, then I've added a link to my blog post here. But basically, I'm also gonna talk about these things. But if you like to read about it and also like refer to it on a much later date, then I've added a link to my blog here. So the first thing that you have to consider is you have to choose the right tool for the job. Some visual testing plugins, they integrate directly to your testing library or framework of choice. Some plugins, they allow you to leverage your functional tests, while some will allow you to write new tests entirely. So depending on which library or framework you're using, choosing the right tooling is an essential aspect when it comes to adding visual testing to your testing strategy. So like nowadays we actually have a lot of visual testing tools to choose from. So from Applitools, Percy, you've got Hapo as well, or you've got like Chromatic. So these are all paid tools. Or on the other hand, if you want to like focus more on like open source tools, then you've got iSpy, you've got Backstop.js, Rate, I think from BBC, but I think it's been discontinued or it hasn't really been updated much recently. You've got Cypress image snapshots, and there's many more. The important thing is with each of the tooling that's available, you need to do a proper analysis as to which will meet your testing requirements the most. And then you also need to consider the level of visual testing that you are going to do. So for me personally, I see visual testing as a combination of both component and full page testing. Component visual test, it focuses on individual components and its different variations, while with the full page visual testing, it focuses on the entire page that our user sees. Now, in your testing strategy, you need to consider if you're going to support both levels, or not. Depending on the type of project that you're working with, you might consider doing component visual testing very important when it comes to, like design systems. On the other hand, you might consider doing full page visual testing much more important, especially on like high traffic pages. And then I also talk about the cross-browser like visual validation aspect as well. So the different types of browsers, there's a lot. You have to consider the different sizes, the different viewports. So as part of your testing strategy, you also need to decide which browsers you are going to support. Depending on the visual tooling of your choice, some visual tools, they support more than one browser. Some tool, they only let you run visual validation on a single browser. Now you need to think about, are you going to automate cross-browser visual validation, or will you adopt a more like hybrid approach? So what I mean by that is, you'll run automated like visual tests on a single browser, and then you have to check like the other browsers manually. So these are the things that you also have to consider. And then test maintenance. So I think with test maintenance, it's an activity that often gets overlooked. Once you have written the visual tests, you also need to make sure that you maintain them as the application's code, like gets refactored, or changed. I see test automation as a development activity as well. So any changes from the application, you also need to check if there are changes that you need on your visual tests. From an ownership point of view, who's going to maintain this test? Is it just the QE team? Is it the entire development team? So if you want the entire development team to do the test maintenance, then you need to make sure that the visual testing tool integrates like very smoothly in their development workflow, and that they can easily write the visual test as well. Now, depending on which visual testing tool that you go for, some visual tools, they don't require a lot of test maintenance, especially when you add new visual tests. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're using visual testing tools that integrate with Storybook. So Storybook is like a system for like handling like different components. Now, if you add new components on Storybook, then some visual testing tools, it will actually pick up those components automatically. So you don't have to write new visual tests for the new components. Another thing that you need to consider is in terms of like approving the visual differences, who's going to approve them? Do you want your design team to approve and also reject the visual changes? If so, then, if you want to open this up, to more people, then this is where like an easy to use visual testing dashboard, where different team members can just easily approve or reject the visual changes will come in very handy. Now, let's move on to pipeline integration. So when introducing visual tests, what is your plan of action when integrating, visual tests to your continuous integration pipelines? So you need to consider if you're going to run visual tests on every pull or merge request, or you're only going to run it after your changes have been deployed to a QA or staging environment. When running this test as well, will you run it on every commit, or will you run it as a manual job that is like triggered, by the person raising those changes? So again, these are very important things that you need to consider. Moving on, I feel that with developer experience, that this is one of the most important things to consider, especially when we are introducing new types of testing. We need to make sure that the developer experience has not degraded. And in order to get their buy-in and for the visual tests to be like valuable, their workflow shouldn't be like as disrupted as much. Getting your developers' opinions is really important, and we need to consider all possible scenarios when integrating visual tests. Now, as a personal example, so on the current company that I'm on, we have integrated visual testing into one of the projects. We've run it as part of our pipeline for about a month, and we actually gathered useful metrics and useful feedback from different engineers. So our approach is, rather than sticking to a solution that we know that works, we took everyone's feedback, and we are now planning to do like another sort of like improvement or another like iteration on how we can improve the overall visual testing experience. At the end, when you integrate or when you introduce visual testing, it's all about a trial and error approach. You can do a POC on an existing tool, but if that doesn't go well with the developer experience, then you have to do a POC on like different tools. So you need to have like an experimentation like culture as well. Cool. And handling baseline images. So this is one of the problems that I've seen, especially like in the past when I started doing visual testing. So how will you store these different baseline images? Now, the paid plugins, so you've got the paid visual testing tools, they actually allow you to store it on their servers, while the free plugins, you have to think more on how you will share the baseline images to the team. You can directly commit these baseline images into your like GitHub repo, but imagine if you have like hundreds of baseline images, it's not really going to be an ideal like solution. So you need to speak to your development team as well on what would be the best approach on handling baseline images. And handling dynamic data. So because visual testing works by doing like pixel by pixel comparison, for most of the tools, there could be a lot of false positives and failures on your visual tests. Now you need to have an action plan as to how you can handle these data changes. You need to make sure that the page you are testing is free of dynamic data as much as possible. You can maybe apply techniques such as, you can mock the data, you can use data fixtures, you can pause the animation, you can use like static date and time. So these are all different activities that you can collaborate with your developers. If you do want to compare dynamic data, so tools such as Aptitools, it uses different AI like algorithms to compare images, just like a real user would do. Alternatively as well, if you and your team have decided that you really want to exclude dynamic data on the pages that you are comparing, a lot of the visual testing tools, they do have a way of excluding particular elements when you do the visual test. So you can exclude the dynamic data. And budget and time constraints. So you need to weigh the pros and cons of each tool and then decide if the tool will deliver more value than cost. So I think this is especially important when you are evaluating paid visual testing tools. If possible, you can create a budget forecast for the upcoming years, because apart from the monetary costs, you also need to evaluate, what is the time and what is the effort that it will take to integrate this visual testing tools. From a cost perspective, you need to analyze carefully if the features that these tools provide are cost effective, and it will be much cheaper in the long run. Moving on, reporting as well. So we know that with the automated tests, reporting is very important. That's the same thing with visual testing, especially if there are some visual changes that needs to be reviewed. How would you communicate this to your team? So if your team is using business communication platform like Slack, it's a good idea to set up automated automated notifications. That's it. If there are any visual changes that needs to be addressed, so at least it's visible to everyone that is involved. And finally, what is the community and maintenance support for the visual tool that you are using? Are there a lot of like handy like tutorials around the tool? When was the tool last updated? These are important questions to consider. And the great thing, if you're going with the paid plugins route, there will always be a dedicated technical support to help you with any specific questions that you might have. When choosing a free plugin, you need to check for example, what is the weekly downloads for this tool? What sort of open issues they have? When did they last bump the version? And because some of these tools integrate as well with your testing framework of choice, it's always a good idea to know if these like plugins are also updated whenever a major version of your testing framework has been like introduced. Cool. So for this session, I'm going to evaluate, or I'm going to share with you how you can integrate like 3 different like visual testing tools. And the main reason why I chose these tools is just from my experience. So I've worked with Cypress for about like 2.5 years now, and during that time I've used different types of visual testing that I can easily integrate into Cypress. So these are the tools that I have used in the past. So what I would like to like share with you now is I want to share like the pros and cons of each of the plugin, and then see if this will actually be useful like for you. So the first tool is Cypress Image Snapshot. This is actually a free plugin that's created by Jared Palmer. The main goal of this plugin is to catch visual regression issues during integration testing. This is a free plugin, and you'll see on the code walkthrough later that you can easily integrate it into Cypress. You can easily integrate it into your continuous integration pipelines. And as for the cost, I don't think I don't think it has been maintained recently. I think the last commit was around January, so we need to check if that is still going to be like supported like in the future. From a reporting perspective, so there's also no single report for visual differences. I'll show later during the code walkthrough that if you have some visual differences, and if there are like 5 tests, for example, then you'll see that there will be 5 different like screenshots which contains all the different visual differences. So if I just want to quickly see like a single report, then it's currently not supported. Since it's pixel by pixel, so it only works well if you have a consistent data. So let's say you have a 1 pixel difference, the tool will be the test will be reported as a failure already. Now, if cross-browser visual testing is a must for you, so I don't think this plugin doesn't have support for other browsers such as Safari or IE11. The next tool is called Percy. So Percy, it's actually another tool out there, that you can integrate not just with Cypress, but with other testing frameworks as well. It's actually been acquired by Browser Stack. So I think from a support perspective, this tool has better support. It is a paid tool, but if you want to simply try it out, they do have a very generous starter plan of 5,000 snapshots a month. So if you are gonna do a lot of POC, then like 5,000 snaps a month is actually quite it's really good. It has a lot of integration, so it has CI integration, it has GitHub or GitLab integration. It also automatically checks, the visual differences on both. So I think it checks it on Chrome by default, but if you want to also check the differences on other browsers like Firefox and also Edge, then there's no additional configuration from your side. The only thing that you need to do is there's like a small change required on the Percy dashboard to enable the test to run on both Firefox and Edge. The dashboard is actually very handy. So from a reporting perspective, from a test maintenance perspective, you can easily approve or reject the visual changes, and you can see all the results in one dashboard. So as for the con, I think up until today they don't support Safari and IE11, although I know they are working to get Safari support as well. So I think if we have Safari support, that's always like a really good thing. It only works well if you have static data as well. So similar with Cypress image snapshot, then you need to do some additional work to make your data as static as possible. And then the last tool that I want to talk about is AptlyTools. So unlike existing visual tools, AptlyTools, they use AI comparison algorithms. So images are compared not via pixel by pixel, but just from what we actually see. It pretty much integrates with almost all of the testing frameworks out there. So apart from Cypress, they have support for Selenium, Appium, WebDriver IO, Espresso, XUI Test. So they do have a lot of like integration with the other testing tools. With AptlyTools as well, you can validate visual differences on a wide range of browsers and viewports. It also has good CI integration, a very good GitHub, like integration as well. And it has a very nice looking dashboard. So if you want to view all the results and share it with the rest of the team, then that is very handy. For the cons, so the only con that I can think of is it's very pricey. So you need to make sure that when choosing, a paid plugin, that you need to consider your budget for this one. Okay, so now that I've talked about, why is visual testing important? What are the things that we have to consider when doing visual testing, and an overview of some of the tools that I have used? I'm gonna do some code walkthrough, and I've added a GitHub like project here that I actually have done in the past. So if you want, after this session, if you want to play around with this project, then you are free, to fork this repo. There are some prerequisites. So you need to have Node and NPM installed. You need to have Visual Studio Code, and you also need to have a developer account on this API called Unsplash. So if you're interested in just trying this out on your personal time, then feel free to use this. And if you have any questions, feel free to connect with me. So let me just go back here. Okay, so for the application, it's actually just a very simple like image search that is based on React. This basically gets the latest images from Unsplash, and so the data that gets returned is always dynamic. So it's I think it changes like every day. So if I run this today, this is the images that I see. If I run this tomorrow, then the visual images will be different. It also changes depending on what search query that we type. So if you type in like donuts, then a lot of donut images will be returned. So the first thing that I want to do a code walkthrough on is how can you install Cypress image snapshot. So again, I've added the GitHub link here, so it's just easier for you to access it from the slides. But basically, there are 3 simple steps to integrate this plugin. So the first thing is we have to install this plugin, add it to our dev dependencies. Then we need to add the following on the Cypress plugins index.js page. this is just one of their configurations, so that any like required like methods that it's being exported. And then like lastly, in terms of the support commands, we just need to import the command and then just call that like method. So it's not that difficult to set this up. The code is there, and I also have it on the project here that I've added. So what I've done is I've written the tests on like 3 different folders. So you've got let me just make that bigger. So you've got Applitools, you've got Cypress image snapshot, and then you've got Percy. For the Cypress image snapshot, so I'll do a quick walkthrough on what the test does. But the main thing to consider here is, before we visit the page, I had to do some side.intercept. So if you're not familiar with side.intercept, so what I'm trying to do here is I'm just intercepting this network call and then waiting for that network call to finish, so that when I visit the page, I can then see all the images that gets returned first. The next thing that I've done is, because I want to make sure that the API returns static data, what I've done here is I'm intercepting this particular query here. And I'm just returning a data fixture called unsplash.json. If I just quickly show you what that fixtures look like, it's just basically a JSON object. So what I've done is I've just created an array of object, some mock data. So this is, what I want the API to return when Cypress intercepts that particular network call. And then this part here, so this is doing the search query. So I'm saying that, okay, if I type, mock, then I should wait for the results to come back. And then hopefully this should return the mock data that I just intercepted here. The most important thing is this command here, sci.match image snapshot. This is the command that actually takes a snapshot of the entire page. I created a simple like command here, so that if I want to run this test, I just need to use the Cypress run command again, and I just need to pass in this particular test. Now, when we run this, so I think I'll have to maybe thinking what's the best way, because I'm only sharing this particular screen because I want to share my VS Code as well. So I just might have to stop sharing for a bit and then share my VS Code. Yeah, okay. So hopefully everyone can see this. But so let's just imagine that we run that test. So the first time that you run the visual test, Cypress image snapshot will actually create a folder for you called snapshots. And then this is where it will store, your baseline images. So this here is my baseline images. So as you can see, it's actually returning the mock data that I have specified. Now, imagine that I remove this this camera icon here. I made some visual changes. So if I run this particular test again, I'm expecting that there will be some visual differences. And in those cases, Cypress image snapshot will create a new folder called diff output. So if I expand this one, you can see that this is the baseline images, this is the test image, and the one in the middle is just a report of what the visual difference are. So I don't know if you can see it clearly, but you can see here that I think this is just a lot of like pixel differences, so not necessarily with the icon. So this is what I mean by like false positive. So even though I've used mock data, but let's say there's still some pixel differences, then the tool will also like report that as a failure. So that's just one thing to consider when choosing a pixel by pixel based tool. Okay, let me stop sharing again because I have to go back to my presentation. Okay. Now, in terms of the next tool, so with Percy, in terms of the installation, so we have to install Percy slash CLI as well as Percy slash Cypress. And as opposed to Cypress image snapshot, in terms of the configuration, we just need to update the Cypress support index.js file and then just import the Percy Cypress command. So it's actually very much like straightforward compared to the other plugin. The actual test itself, it's very similar. The main difference is rather than calling sci.matchImage snapshot, I'm just calling sci.Percy snapshot here. And then when you run the test, there is an API token that you need to export first. So when you create a free account in Percy, you'll see on your project's settings that there is a Percy token there that you need to export when you want to run it locally. So you need to make sure that you do that first. And then it's quite different from Cypress image snapshot in a way that when we run the test, we have to wrap the test command in the Percy exec command in order to be able to run our tests. Now, this will run the Percy agent. So Percy can actually receive the snapshots from our Cypress test. And once the build is finished, the rendered screenshots will then be uploaded to Percy's dashboard. Okay, and the last tool that I want to quickly do a code walkthrough is the apply tools for Cypress. So similarly, in terms of the setup, it's also very straightforward. We just need to install apply tools ICE Cypress as a dev dependency. And then they actually have a very handy command called npx ICE setup. Now, ICE setup will actually automatically configure all the required configurations for us. So if we quickly go back to my Visual Studio Code again, so I'll just share that. Where is it code? Okay, so if you run npx ICE setup in your terminal, it will actually add this command here. So it will require the apply-tools ICE Cypress module. It will also import the apply-tools ICE Cypress commands. And I think if you are using TypeScript, so because I'm just using plain JavaScript on this project, so if you're using TypeScript, the npx ICE setup command will actually create a supporting file so that you can also use apply-tools ICE Cypress when you're on a TypeScript project. So this will all be handled like automatically if you just run the npx ICE like setup command. If I go back to my presentation again, Google Chrome, yeah. Okay. So in terms of what the test looks like, so the side.intercept, I still had to put it there because I want to wait for the actual results page to be returned before I visit the page. And then these different commands here. So side.ice open, this will actually initialize the apply-tools ICE. You need to pass like what your app name is. Batch name is quite important. So if you want like multiple tests to be grouped on the same batch, then you just have to give it the same batch name. And then in terms of browser, so by default, this will run in Chrome, but you can specify like what is the width and height that you want to test. If you want to run it on like other browsers, then you need to just expand this array to include the other browser's name. And then that eyes check window. So this is the command that will actually take a snapshot of your DOM and then send it to Aptitool server. And then that eyes close. This is just the command to actually close the Aptitool's eyes once the DOM snapshots has been uploaded. I'm going to see if I can open my Aptitools account here, so I can just quickly show you what it looks like. Oh. So as you can see from the dates, I haven't run this like very recently, but if we look at maybe this one. Okay, so as you can see here, because these have dynamic data, so Applitools has reported this as a failure. But if you want to ignore this dynamic data and you just want to compare it based on like the overall layout, then Applitools has, you know, like different like algorithms that you can apply. So for this particular thing, you can add like a layout region so that if the layout for this is like not impacted, then if there are dynamic data, then the test should still pass. So these are like really good if you have a lot of dynamic data on your pages. Cool. So I'm almost at the end of my presentation. And just to wrap things up, so Cypress alone is not the best tool for testing the look and feel of your application. It's good for, you know, testing the functionality, but in terms of like the visual styling, it's always good to leverage another tool that can do a much better job. So again, yep, leverage third-party plugins instead that takes a snapshot of the page. Oh. And remember that there are so many things to consider when choosing which visual tool. The moment you've chosen a actual tooling, it doesn't stop there. So there's a lot of other things as well that you have to consider, like, you know, the baseline images, the reporting, the test maintenance, the developer experience, and so on. So just make sure that you also consider all those things when you do visual testing. And the tool that you choose, it should be able to work with your testing requirements. And again, it's really about a trial and error approach. So it's good to foster an experimentation culture within your team. Just because a tool works for you in the past doesn't mean that it will always work in like future projects. So have an experimentation mindset so that at least you can choose a tool that will work best depending on what your current needs are. And I think, yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. I will share the slides so at least everything is in one place. So it has all the links that you need. And if you have any specific questions, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. So I've got my Twitter handle at mcruzdrake, or you can message me on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, I'm hoping that, yeah, if there are any questions, I can answer some of those. Or if you have any like specific questions that you don't want to ask now, then yeah, just like feel free to message me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Oh, I can't hear you, Akshaya. Oh, sorry. Because of the name Sandeep. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still logged in with this account. Thanks very much for this lovely presentation. I think this is like the best collection of how to get started and how to have the right, like kind of recipe books, recipes for incorporating multiple snapshot tools with Cypress. That's just lovely. We didn't have many questions, but there's this question which actually I do have myself about how do you manage it with running locally versus in a pipeline. Usually, let's say locally you have a Windows or a Mac machine. Browsers behave differently, slightly differently than you do on Linux.
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
So I actually had this problem on my previous project. So we were generating the baseline images locally, and then on our pipeline, the test images are being like tested on whatever configuration we have on our CI. So we'll always have a lot of like false positives. So what we actually did was we use Docker so that every time we generate the baseline images locally, it's on a Docker container, and then the same image is actually run on the CI pipeline as well. So at least we were able to mitigate, a lot of like the false positives, because we make sure that when running the baseline images locally, that rather than doing it locally, we use Docker container with the same like configuration as if we were running it on the CI pipeline.
Yeah, I think this is kind of what we were doing with Backstop as well. That also kind of offers the
Yeah.
same kind of a solution. It's a little bit of a small challenge to
Yeah.
initially set up, but otherwise it runs great and it makes it more, how shall we say, more reliable.
Yeah.
It's less.
Yeah.
Pradeep asks if you can work, I don't know, it says, can I work Cypress Snapshot plugin in AWS S3?
Yes, you can. So on my previous project as well, that's what we did. So at first, we only have, I think, like less than 10 visual tests on the project. So at first, we stored it on the GitHub project directly, but then obviously over time, more team members are adding in visual tests. So we thought of storing it on an AWS S3 bucket. So the way we've done it is we just use the AWS CLI command. So we created a bucket, and then we created different commands on our package.json. We have one command to download the baseline images from the S3 bucket that we created. And then the other command is to upload the local baseline images using, that Docker container, and upload that to S3. So before running, the visual tests, we have a step on our pipeline that downloads the baseline images from AWS S3. And then that way, rather than like storing, like getting it from the project repo, it's actually getting it from AWS S3, and then storing it temporarily on a folder structure that we have specified.
We also had something similar. There was some kind of a little bit of a client that was running on one of our EC2 instances, which would give us an API to fetch and update these instances, these images, baselines. And we weren't using Docker that time. So we actually had the name of the environment. So it's like Darwin or Linux or Debian.
Yeah.
Appended to the snapshot. So depending on the environment you're running in, it would fetch and compare the images accordingly. That was a workaround to it. So you actually had two snapshots of every test or every snapshot in the test.
Yeah.
It was an interesting
actually
one.
Yeah, it's good to hear what other people's like solutions have come up with. So yep, it's good, that you've managed to find a workaround as well.
I think that's more or less it in the questions answers. I think I'll just open the floor to anyone who has another question to ask. Otherwise, then it'll be a wrap up. Marie, just before we leave, we got just one little question. Somebody wants to know if you can slow Cypress down so that you could see some test case failure stuff. Is there a way to just say, slow down?
So I know you can. Cypress is very faster, and we make it a little bit slow down. So it depends, I guess, on what scenario you are planning to do. So if, say for example, you're typing something and it's really too fast, you can slow that down by passing in a specific object. I forgot the actual name, but there is a way. but in other cases, I think from experience, I only found issues in terms of typing really fast on a field. Sometimes the characters that gets added is like cut off. It doesn't include, the full like string that I want to type. So we had to like do some slow typing, so that at least it's not as fast, so you can do that. But I think in most cases it does wait for your application as well. So if your elements are interactable, then Cypress will automatically just interact with that. I'm just thinking of what other scenarios where it's like really fast, but I can only think of like the fast typing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the option is called the key is delay in the options object,
Yes.
which will add
Yeah.
a few
Delay. Yeah.
milliseconds of however you
Yeah.
want it. So you
Yeah.
can type slowly. I think that would be helpful if you have some AJAX, asynchronous requests for some kind of a live search or suggestion stuff. So that
Yeah.
kind of helps. But yeah, other than that, I'm not sure. I was actually sometimes even wondering that if I don't know if they have it now or not, but at one time there was a request of mine that if you could slow the network down for a test. So when I'm starting running a test, I just want the network to be slow because you can catch different kinds of errors when you have a slower network.
Yeah, I don't know if Intercept has support for that. I haven't played
Yeah,
around
you
with
have,
it yet.
but that's like one off. So for this request, please slow it down. But maybe you want the
Yeah.
whole thing to be slow. So it's like you just open
Yeah.
dev console and then say, okay, network throttle it to fast 3G, for example.
Yes, yeah.
So we had issues in our pipeline where sometimes when there was enough load on the whole infrastructure, things would be slow and tests
Yeah.
would fail.
Mm-hmm.
But normally running, you couldn't reproduce it. So
Yeah.
that was an interesting one. So it would be nice if I could just say that run the whole set of tests or the new tests that I create with a slower network and just see
On a
that
slow network.
nothing will fail because of that kind of a slow response. Then I have more
That's
confidence in my
interesting, yeah.
tests being stable in the pipeline.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting scenario. To be honest, I haven't experienced that. Like I haven't tested it on a slow network using Cypress, but definitely one thing that you have to consider, because we need to also make sure that when using 3G or like really slow network connectivity, that our users can still access our application the way that we want them to.
You worked for good employers who pay enough for good infrastructure in testing.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, that's it for now then. Thank you very much for participating, everyone, for your time. And Marie, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
And
Thank you as well.